Okay, thanks everybody for coming out tonight. This is Introduction to Perl 6, Part 2. I did the original part last year. Going to finish it up tonight. So previously on Introduction to Perl 6, I just want to remind you that this talk is not going to show you all the new cool features about Perl 6. This talk is trying to show how similar Perl 6 is to Perl 5. So it's to ease you into it so you don't feel afraid. Everybody feels nice and safe. So, all right, not going to go over all that stuff again. We talked about scalar, arrays, hashes, and I ended on bools, true or false. Correct. All right, so we're going to talk about conditionals. All right, so conditionals. Basically, what I did up here is made everybody feel nice and safe because I did it pretty much the same way you do it in Perl 5. So I just did if we just set a Perl Guru level to 1. So if Perl Guru, but you notice one minor thing is you don't need parentheses anymore, so I didn't put those in. And it's going to say Larry Wall. If I go and switch that to a 0, it's going to say me. Then down here is where it's a little more interesting. Well, not quite here yet, but down below. So here I just set it to a string, and again I'm doing it kind of the Perl 5 way, right? Looks very familiar. So we set it to Hi Guru, and Hi Guru is going to be Randall Schwartz. And then basically I've got an unless down here that, will catch if none of the above works. But this right here is really the way you would do this now. Although I'm given to understand that this is now in Perl 5. So basically, you can think of this as a switch for Perl. Basically, it's given Perl Guru level, and then it's just when. And whatever here, it does a smart match against this variable against each one of the values here. And I'm not going to talk more about smart matches because that's one of those fancy, scary things. So I'm just going to say just enough that to tantalize your interest for future talks. So then basically it just says the same things, does the same things. So we'll go ahead and give this a run. And oh, hang on. Wrong one. Yes. Conditionals. So you can see, like I predicted, Larry Wall, Randall Schwartz, unless anybody but Randall, or but Larry Wall, and then Doug Miles down here. I can go in and tweak stuff, but I'm guessing this is pretty clear. Anybody want me to tweak anything and rerun it? Okay, we're good then. All right. Really?
Oh, it's running in the background.
Oh, thank you. Okay, now we will talk about loops. Okay. So here, there is a little bit of syntax change. Normally you would see a QW and parentheses, but now basically they gave kind of promoted word quoting so that it's got its own operators now. Just the angle brackets around it does the same thing as QW. So that's all it's doing, putting it into an array. And then basically I'm giving you a loop again that's a little closer to Perl 5 than the Perl 6 way I'll show you later. But we just loop through, we've got our default topical variable, right? Dollar underscore. Since I didn't put it into any variable, it's going to go into dollar underscore. And then I'm just giving us a little extra space line break there. Now this here is more the Perl 6 way of doing it. So we say for at names arrow name. That means take each value one at a time, put it into the variable name. Yes, sir.
So having missed the first talk, is the use strict pragma still around? Or,
It's actually on by default.
oh, good.
Yes.
So wouldn't that blow up because you haven't defined name, or you haven't declared name?
Well, actually, if I were using name just within a block, it would. But it automatically is localized, or I shouldn't say localized, it's automatically within the scope of the block that we're using it in, automatically, yeah. So good question, though. Good catch.
It's almost like a for each, really, in other languages. It's like taking that scalar out of the array, right?
Yeah. And basically, Perl 5 has for, which is supposed to be like C-type loops, and for each, which is this type of loop. But actually, they're identical, and you can actually swap them. I don't know if you knew that, but yeah. But Perl 6 isn't that way, and we'll get to that in a little bit. So then I've just got another blank line. And then I'm just showing you doing the same thing using the range operator. So we still have the double dot range operator. No surprises there, right? Just puts it into number, prints it out. And then I do the same thing again with alpha range. It again does the same thing it does in Perl 5. It just is going to go through A through F. And that's just, I just picked F for hex. I could have put Z, whatever. Doesn't matter. So basically, it'll just range through from capital A to capital F. Now, this is what I was talking about earlier when I said it's a little different. So there's no more for each. For each has been replaced by for, and for as a C loop has been replaced by loop. So again, this one, now you can see, otherwise though, the syntax is the same, right? Other than the keyword. Syntax is the same, but note the parentheses. You do need the parentheses here, otherwise it's ambiguous. So for this, there's a lot of places in Perl 6 that they've done away with where, you're required to use parentheses. I mean, they've gradually been doing that in Perl 5 anyways, making them optional in more and more places, but Perl 6 takes it even further, so you need a lot fewer parentheses. But this is one of the places you do need it. This is how, obviously I don't want to do an infinite loop, so I commented out, but that's what's kind of nice though, is you just do an empty loop or put whatever your stuff is, your code is in here, and you just say loop with nothing, and it does the same while one, exactly. So that's the...
Would it respond to last, the loop operator?
Yes. Yeah. So let's see. And then basically we've got while, and that again, other than the lack of parentheses, does pretty much the way you're used to with Perl 5.
And where did you instantiate number? generate
Oh.
link?
Probably way back up the top here somewhere. I just kept using it for, say, no. Okay.
See if
I
it
might
pulls
have
up
to
more.
double check myself on that now because I was virtually positive that it was on by default. Or yeah, there you go. Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm just glad I can return the heckling from my last meeting.
Yeah, that'll be great. The more you heckle, the more presentations you have to do as penance. So, anyways, now instead of the do while pseudo loop, I don't know if anybody really understood that, but it wasn't quite a real loop with do while. Actually, now that's repeat while. And this is a real loop. So you can use all the like next, last, all your normal loop operators. You're not restricted like you were with the do, where it's kind of looks like a loop, but it's not really a loop. So,
Curly bracket sounds like you can have code there, right? That matter.
I'm sorry, where's that at?
The number you inside the curly bracket, it sounds like you can run the embedded code there.
Oh, yes, yes. Yeah, you missed that if you weren't here for the first presentation. Yeah, real quick. Basically, you can interpolate anything, any kind of code in double quotes, as long as you put it in curly braces. For anybody that wasn't here for the first presentation, I talked about that then. So that, yeah, that's exactly what's going on, is this is literally being method calls, anything. You can, again, it's, used with great power comes great responsibility. But, I figure for just incrementing a number, it's not that big a deal, especially since this is just a demo. So, any other questions about this? I'm still waiting to hear back from Eric.
I found one article that basically says, yeah, the Perl 6's Perl 5 was strict turned on, but another article basically said you need to use strict.
Okay. Well, it could be too that that's one of the things you have to be careful of when you're researching stuff with Perl 6 is, since this has been going on for 15 years, sometimes there's really old information that's no longer valid. So you got to pay attention to dates of how recent stuff is. And it could be too that I read that and maybe that got changed.
According to this was from
But
October 12th of last year.
okay, well then I would say that's probably valid because by October they were, gearing up to
Yeah, the other source I
do a
looked at
release.
that said that you need to turn it on was January 9th, 2001.
Okay, well then there you go. So I was wrong. You actually do need to use,
No, the 2001, that's much older than the
oh,
other article. So theoretically, when you run this, it should complain about numbers not being,
okay,
that's fine.
let's find out. And I gotta look. Oops.
Maybe strict doesn't work the same in Perl 6.
I will basically I'll post the list afterwards. I'll figure out what the deal is with this because at this point I don't know the answer. But basically you can see that we're basically getting what we expect, right? I assume nobody is surprised by any of the output here. Nothing? Okay. We will go on to the next. Okay. Now, those of you who have seen my Perl 101 talk that's talking about Perl 5, you'll notice that basically I took that talk and I just ported it to Perl 6. So this is basically the same, literally the same stuff that I did in my Perl 101 talk, and I just ported it to Perl 6. So, all right. So, and I did use my there, but kind of surprised I didn't use my. I'm disappointed in myself. I mean, that's almost like a reflex. So, all right. So you notice here, this is a good place to use your repeat because you want this to always execute at least once, right? You want it to prompt. There's actually now a prompt command. You don't have to use, that's part of the language. You don't have to use a module or anything like that. So you just put in whatever the prompt is, and then whatever they type in is returned into something. Then I'm just going to parrot that back. Ha. That was terrible. I should be shot for that. Okay. So, anyways, then it's just going to, as long as I put something true in there, it's going to keep doing it over and over again.
And it automatically jumps off the loop.
It does. Thank you. Another good catch there. And let's see. Because I'm somewhat of a literalist. So, anyways. You get the idea there, right? Okay, so any questions on that before I move on? Okay, I think that was pretty basic. All right. Now, basically, the reason why I put a disclaimer here is because this is really not a Perl 6 way of doing this. So there are better ways of doing this, but I'm doing it this way just because, again, this is more like how you would do it in Perl 5. So you notice argv is spelled differently now. It's now args, ditching its C heritage. And you'll notice that there are two symbols in front of it. That's twidgel. I believe it's either twigel or twidgel, but I'm picking twidgel because it rhymes with sigil. So anyway, that you will see on all Perl global variables. It actually indicates that it's a dynamic variable, but that's a subject for another talk. I'm not gonna, don't worry about that. For now, just know that any of the built-in globals will have the star as the second symbol in front of it. You look puzzled, sir.
Does that also apply to like $$ is the process ID, so would it be then $?
That may have been completely renamed, and I haven't looked into it, so I couldn't tell you. But feel free if you want to tell us the answer. You don't have to, but... Well, actually, but if somebody wants to keep track of all the questions and send me an email, I would appreciate it, because then I'll be sure to answer them all after the talk. So basically, I didn't find anything that explicitly told me that it was automatically opening and closing the files, but I assume that it is. I mean, Perl 5 does it, so I have no reason to expect that Perl 6 wouldn't do that for you. So basically, we say for file name .io, and this is, again, no more arrow operator for method calls. It's now dot, just for people who weren't here before, dot lines. So I'm saying I want to do an IO operation, and the operation I want is lines, which happens to just return one line at a time. And then I just say line. So basically, this is a quick and dirty version of cat in Perl 6. So any questions before I run it? Nope. let's see. Oh, Perl cat. Of course, I had to get descriptive.
Oh, yeah, you
Oh.
raised the 6 too.
Thank you. See, I told you this was going to be a disaster.
Sorry,
I knew
Dan.
it.
Should have never turned off the projector.
Never again. Whoops. And the reason why I did that is because I didn't give it a file. So we'll, whoops. Oh, sorry about that. It's really hard to type when you can't see what you're typing. Cat. Okay, there you go. Sorry about that. So I just used it to cat itself out. So, make sense to everybody? All right. And I apologize to anybody who's viewing this video. We had technical difficulties. I can't see what's on my screen, so that's why I'm messing up way more than I usually do. And of course. All right, so now, again, this follows the same model of Perl 5, where the more you're doing, the less code there actually is to do it. Perl 5 did the same thing. So this again, I'm putting up here 5 as an explanation of the longhand way of doing this. I'm basically calling lines on arg files, which arg files gives you like all the files that are there. So by default, if I just say 4 lines, and you notice now, this is something else about Perl 6, a little tip that I'll give you that isn't necessarily talking as much about how Perl 5 and Perl 6 are similar, but most methods can be called as functions and vice versa. So you notice I'm not actually using lines as a method off of anything. I'm just calling it as a function. And then I could say $_.say, but if I just say .say, it does the same thing. I wouldn't necessarily do this in production Perl 6 code because, again, it's really tricky. But I'm just showing you that it's using the same principles that Perl 5 does as far as with, default variables and stuff like that. And it's just going one extra step and saying, hey, if you just put a dot in front of this, we're going to assume you're calling it on $_. And that's what it does. So, all right. Surprised I haven't typed ls yet. I'm still expecting to do that. Okay, let's see. Which one of these was it? Print file.
File?
Yeah, it's probably print file.
File
Actually,
P6? Oh. That's the cat one. That's back one.
oh, okay. You know what? Then I ran the wrong one before. Because the cat one does. So I showed you this one before when I ran it on just one file.
Okay.
So yeah, so I'll rerun it. I mean, unless you really want me to go through it, it's going to do basically the same thing. But I'll rerun Perl cat with multiple files, and then you'll see that it actually concatenates those together. So sorry, I ran the wrong one. It's amazing how one little technical difficulty will completely throw you off your game. All right. And foo.log, what the heck? Haven't talked about that yet, but we'll just concatenate those two things. So you can see it actually did. This junk is coming from foo.log, and this is just catting out Perl cat again. So sorry for the little confusion of running the the wrong program at the wrong time, but basically the other one just handles one file. This Perl cat will concatenate multiple files just like cat will do. Yep, so everybody unconfused? Good, thank you. All right. Reading from standard in, okay. And this time, before I confuse everybody, okay, log to file. Just want to make sure I run the right program this time. So basically I'm getting my file name by using shift kind of in the way you would expect. Open, you'll notice the syntax is different. Basically now you've got the :A, which is append. If I wanted it to be write, it would be W. R for read. So
Do they still support the read write?
I believe so, but I haven't looked into that. If somebody wants to take that down as a question, I'll answer it. So, and again, we're doing the repeat while, and then enter something. The difference is that now we're putting the something into the file handle, right? So it's basically whatever file name I give it, it's going to write it, it's going to say it out to that file. And you remember say by default is like print, except that it will put a new line automatically at the end. So you almost always use say. I hardly ever use print when I'm doing Perl 6 because you almost always want.
But you could do file handler print? If you
I could,
Okay.
but if I wanted a new line in there, I'd have to put it in myself manually. So.
Is it still running the other program?
Oh,
You get Control C and,
yeah.
So why is it always like this? It just-
Well, this is a little funky because I was doing it under Windows just because I could. Normally I would do this under Linux, and I think I'll go back to my policy of doing that. But because it's actually running it, when I run Perl 6, that's actually a batch file that then is running it. So that's why we're getting the weird, when I try to Control C out of it, it's giving us the error, terminate batch job. So that's just Windows weirdness. If I was under any sane operating system, it wouldn't do that. So let's get our stuff back so I don't get confused. Okay, log to file. I'm going to go ahead and choose foo.log just to prove that it is appending because we already catted that out, so we know there's junk in there. So we'll type something I know I didn't have in there before.
I guess it is a PG.
Well, you're expecting
Uh,
something else?
Yeah, so anyways, gonna break out of this, and we'll use 6. Okay, since we already have a tool here, might as well use it. So there you go. It's got all the junk. This is where I was testing overwrite before I changed it to append. Append, it works, blah, 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 junk. Erica's a troublemaker. Not really. He's awesome. So, any questions on that? This is going to drive me insane. I don't know why it keeps doing that. Pretty much, yeah.
It's unexplainable.
Okay, let's see. All right, I'm doing all right on time. So now we'll talk about functions. And first we'll talk about arguments. So again, I'm not doing any of the fancy stuff with typing or any of that stuff. That's there. I'll talk about it someday, but again, we're just showing you how relatively easy it would be to port Perl 5 code to Perl 6. It really wasn't very hard for me to do this. So, calling a function with no arguments. So let's jump down here and see what that does. So we declare it exactly the way you would in Perl 5, no surprises there. This function has no arguments with a comment that were at the end. So not very interesting, but very literal. So now function with 2 arguments. So I just set up a scalar with the value arg1, and then I hard-coded the value arg2 just to show you that there's no difference, passing in a scalar as passing in a literal. No particular reason other than that. So function with 2 arguments. Scroll down here. Again, the declaration's pretty much like you would expect. This is our good old friend, add underscore. It mostly works the same. I'll get to one of the subtle differences in a little bit. So I get arg1, arg2, and I just print those out. Nothing magical about the angle brackets, so don't anybody think that there is there. I'm just highlighting what the arguments are. And then we've got function with many args. And so here you can see I just took advantage of my words being quoted, stuck them into args, and then you can see, just like in Perl 5, I can pass as 1,000 arguments if I wanted to. So that's what's really nice. What I love what they did with Perl 6 is they made, all the stuff that you expect with Perl 5 to work. But then they added on a whole bunch of other stuff where you can have it work differently. Like you can restrict the number of parameters if you want, and you can restrict the type. And it will do checking and all of that stuff, type checking on your variables. So, but again, that's a different talk. Just again, teasing you with that information. What's that?
Method signatures?
Yes, basically, yeah. You can actually get multi-dispatch and everything, which you couldn't do in Perl 5 because there was really no great way of doing that. So you can with Perl 6 though. So anyways, blah, blah, blah. Where was I? Okay, function with many args. And you can see I'm just looping through them. So nothing fancy there. All right, everybody good with the code so far before I run it? And arguments, good. I named it something sane. Oops. Okay. Okay, function with no arguments, arg1, arg2, and there we've got all of our arguments. So pretty straightforward, I think. As a Perl 5 programmer, it's not a whole lot that's jumping out and surprising me at this point. All right, Any questions? Yeah.
So, does, stuff like, packages like DBI work, like that?
That's basically, that's an interesting kind of open question where I can't say yay or nay on any given module, because basically there is a way that you can run Perl 5 code under Perl 6. From my understanding, though, the current state of it is not everything. There are some things that will work, other things that don't work. And also Perl 6 is in the process of building up their own ecosystem of modules. So there aren't a lot yet. I mean, especially, we just had a release, in end of December. So I've actually got a link to the modules, so I'll show you that a little later. But so the answer is it depends. For some things it will work, other things don't work, but they are still working on that functionality. The goal is to eventually be able to use, any module off of CPAN that's Perl 5 and use it in Perl 6. That way they don't necessarily have to rewrite the whole ecosystem. If you've got something out there that works, sometimes it's good not to reinvent the wheel. Which you almost never hear me say, because I tend to reinvent wheels a lot. I'm terrible when it comes to reinventing wheels that don't need to be reinvented. Okay, so now we'll talk about return values. So you've got a function with return, and you notice it's being put into a scalar. Again, no surprises there. The syntax is just like Perl 5. So function with return, shifting each one off. Again, it's a terrible name when it's really should be add, but whatever.
I'm assuming you can remove the add underscores, just tap shift.
Actually, I'm thinking you can't, because otherwise I wouldn't have put those in there.
Oh, okay.
I could be wrong though. And again, because full disclaimer here, everything I knew about Perl 6 I've learned in the last few months. So, I could be wrong about some of this stuff, so I apologize in advance. And I will try to correct myself on the list if I find out that I was incorrect about something. So, all right, then we've got names, which we quote again with the angle brackets. And then we pass in the names, and we pass in a 1, and we'll show what that does. Again, these are not terribly exciting examples, but they're literally the same examples I used in my Perl 101. Just to give you an idea, that's why this is so basic too, is because it's off the Perl 101. It's to give you the very basics of, here you can pass arguments to functions, here you can get return values. So I know a lot of you guys, you don't need this, but again, it's just a tool to illustrate how similar they are. So I'm shifting off that first flag, which is my ascending or descending flag. It's basically for sorting. And then I'm saying, now this is one of the subtle differences I said I would mention earlier. I'm making a copy because parameters are now read-only by default. So add underscore is read-only. You can't, in my Perl 5 version of this, I think I was just sorting it directly in that and returning that. Perl 5, I just copy it to another variable. And then I say if ascending, return sort, else return reverse sort. And again, you can tell that syntax is the same as Perl 5. And so basically, since I passed it a 1, it will sort them in ascending order. Any questions on any of that code? All right. Oops. And return values. So you can see, yeah, it added 1 and 1. Woo! Computer science. We're doing complicated stuff here. All right, there are my sorted names. There are my reverse sorted names. So, pretty basic stuff. But again, the point of this talk is because I know, a lot of people have heard a lot of things about Perl 6, and some of them are true, some of them are not true, some of them are, hyped. Some people make it sound like it's so different that it's really scary. But I'm just showing you that it doesn't have to be scary. It definitely. Larry is just following his own tradition of how he does things, because he always said about Perl 5 that, you could do Perl 5 in baby talk, You only learn just a little bit, enough to get the job done. Same with Perl 6. This is basically the Perl 6 equivalent of baby talk. I'm just getting into that. But the point is, once you do this, you keep learning more and more and more of the features of Perl 6, and you start using those rather than doing it like the Perl 5 way, which I will show you in other presentations down the road. Definitely, that will vary on interest, because I don't want to, constantly bombard everybody with Perl 6 stuff if, because most of us, let's face it, are still doing Perl 5 and probably will be for a while. So I know I definitely will. But part of this is extremely tempting to me as a presenter, because let's face it, I've been doing this for so many decades. I've almost run out of things to talk about in Perl 5, which is ridiculous. It just means I haven't tried hard enough to find new things to talk about, because there are plenty of new things to talk about all the time. But it's really easy with Perl 6 for me to find completely brand new things that I've never seen before. So I will try to restrain myself. I will try to restrain myself, I promise.
Just a side question.
Yes.
The advance for this presentation, but what you want array, how did they, returns?
For returns, I seem to remember reading something that basically you don't need that anymore. That Perl 6, I think, figures it out by context of if there's a scalar there, it knows that it's being called expecting to return only a scalar. But again, if somebody can take that down as a question, thank you, Eric. I really appreciate it.
Because you have to know, I modified what I did, and
Yeah.
got it based on whether I wanted a list or a scalar back. So
Yeah. I will write up an example of that. I'll research it and come up with an example. Yeah.
just made me think of it, return values.
No, that's a good question. All right. And so basically, good thing I'm not as rushed as I was at the end of the other one. I've got links here to getting started, the documentation, which actually, I have to say, they are doing, the documentation is by no means complete, but what's there, I seem to find is really high quality. And I shouldn't be surprised, because in general, Perl 5's documentation is pretty good. It's above average, I would say, compared to other languages. But it actually will show you, if you look through the documentation, all of the built-in object types and how they all inherit from each other and which one does what, and it actually has diagrams and all that good stuff. But that's left as an exercise to you guys. You can go look at all that. I've already looked at it. Okay, let's see. And since I promised I would show this, oops, I will go ahead and click through to the modules. And basically, this gives you an idea. I know I'm scrolling kind of fast, but you can see there too, there's different degrees of how complete the implementation actually is. Well, there's actually a lot more here than the last time I checked.
Yeah,
There's a lot.
So
So
is this basically the new CPAN, or will eventually CPAN also have these guys, and then somehow you'll just have to see its Pro 6
I think that's still an open question too, because I know I've read about some work of getting Perl 6 modules to work with CPAN and all that stuff, but I'm not positive that that's the direction they're going to go in. I'm not sure at this point. So they may just go ahead and put Perl 6 stuff in with the Perl 5 stuff in CPAN, or they may come up with a different repository for Perl 6. Also, if you want to gain fame and glory, you can come over here to the most wanted. And I am actually attempting, oh, I can't believe I'm saying this on camera. This is horrible. Because then I like,
You can always deny it that we have it.
yeah,
You need the microphone.
okay.
Really?
I'm actually trying this. I actually was on IRC asking some questions about using the native call interface. I guess since I'll filibuster since I've got a few minutes left. So, yeah, I'm basically trying to learn the native call interface, which is so much. It's like not even, I can't even find the words to describe how good it is compared to XS, which I never did learn because every time I looked at it, I was just like, everything I already needed, somebody else had already done. I could never find, a project that I really wanted to learn XS on, so I never did. So I figured since I actually do use DBM stuff, and I actually wanted to port one of my scripts, Perl 5 scripts, over to Perl 6 where I'm using the DBM module and it doesn't exist, I figured, why not? I'll give it a try. No promises though. Because I did find out already, it was so funny, there's actually somebody there on IRC, I forget who it was, but there was somebody else that was already working on it as well. And what was nice is he just posted, he said he had given up at this. I didn't quite understand if he meant he was giving up completely or if he was just taking a break for now, but he had a partial implementation up there that I'll be looking at. And maybe between my code and his code, I can figure something out. I don't know. But
So you're actually gonna be the module writer for this.
no, that's too much pressure. I can't handle that kind of pressure. So, all right. Any other general questions? Anything that you saw that maybe you missed from the first presentation? I'll be happy to answer any of that. If I remember, that was like 3 months ago. So, okay. All right. Thank you very much for coming tonight.